Have you ever confused those sort of butterflies of a thrilling romance with the literal fight or flight response of sheer anxiety?
Oh, wow, yeah.
Right. You know the exact feeling I'm talking about. Your heart is just pounding relentlessly against your ribs. You're like constantly checking your phone, and your stomach is tied up in agonizing knots.
Yeah, it's awful.
And you tell yourself, well, wow, I must really be falling for this person. But what if that feeling isn't passion at all? What if your body is actually sounding a massive, biological alarm?
It is a phenomenal question.
Hmm.
I mean, it really forces us to look at the very foundation of how we connect with other people,
Yeah.
because we are so heavily conditioned by movies, by literature, by pop culture to just romanticize that intense, chaotic, breathless feeling.
Like it's the ultimate goal, right?
Exactly. We view it as the ultimate marker of true love. But if you look at it neurologically and biologically, those physiological symptoms you just listed, the racing heart, the knots in the stomach, that obsessive focus, they are identical to a stress response.
That's just wild to think about.
It really is. It is often something entirely different from love.
And that is exactly what we're exploring in this deep dive today. We are looking at the hidden psychological patterns that dictate, our romantic lives, our careers, and fundamentally our sense of self-worth.
It's such an important topic.
It really is. And we're drawing today from an incredibly revealing, very raw interview between Adver Brugge and Marian Mudder.
Yeah, that interview is just fantastic.
Marian is fascinating because she's a former actress who completely pivoted her life to become a therapist, and she's the author of the book, What I Wish I Had Known Earlier About Love.
The conversation they have is remarkably honest, I have to say.
Oh, completely.
She doesn't just, sit back and dispense clinical advice from some ivory tower. She actively uses her own history.
Yeah, which is super vulnerable.
Decades of incredibly difficult, painful relationship dynamics, actually. And she uses all of that to dissect the hidden mechanics of love, stress, and attachment.
Right.
She lays out her own failures to explain how we all fall into these traps.
And our mission today is to help you, the listener, decode your own romantic blueprint. We want to help you separate true, sustainable love from these, stress-driven trauma bonds.
Which is easier said than done, obviously.
Oh, for sure. We're going to explore how to stop projecting our own unhealed internal struggles onto the people around us. And I want to be clear right up front, while a lot of Marian's examples focus heavily on romantic love, keep your ears open.
Definitely.
Because these insights about stress, attachment, and this desperate burning need to be chosen, they apply perfectly to your workplace dynamics, your friendships, and especially your family.
Right, because the mechanisms of human connection simply don't change just because you walk into an office building or, sit down at a really tense family dinner.
Yeah, your brain doesn't know the difference.
Exactly. The underlying programming, the way your nervous system interprets safety and threat, is identical across all those environments.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because Marian proposes an idea that on its face sounds quite radical, maybe even a little discouraging at first. It can definitely feel heavy.
Right. We tend to think our love lives start when we're teenagers. You hit puberty, you have your first crush at 16, maybe you experience your first real heartbreak in high school or college.
Yeah, the classic coming-of-age story.
Exactly. And you think, okay, this is chapter 1 of my romantic life. But Marian argues that your love life actually starts the day you are born.
Yes, the very first day.
The way your parents handle your emotions from infancy literally teaches you what love is. And far more importantly, it teaches you how much love you are fundamentally worth.
She calls it the blueprint of your love life, which is a very precise way to look at it, I think.
A blueprint, yeah.
Because before you even have the capacity for language, before you can form a conscious memory, you're learning the fundamental rules of human engagement.
Wow, so it's all pre-verbal.
Completely pre-verbal. A baby's brain is basically a sponge for relational data.
Okay, what does that mean exactly in practice? Well, if you cry because you're hungry or frightened, and a caregiver approaches you, soothes you, and regulates your distress, your developing brain learns a very specific lesson.
Which is?
You learn that the world is responsive, that your distress matters, and crucially, you learn that you are worthy of comfort.
Okay, that makes sense. That's the ideal scenario.
Right. But if, however, you cry and you are repeatedly ignored, or if your caregivers are physically present but emotionally depressed and unavailable.
Which happens a lot, unfortunately.
It does. In those cases, you learn a vastly different set of rules. You learn that your needs are a burden, that crying doesn't work, or that attempting to connect with another human being is inherently unsafe or pointless.
Wait, hold on. Why is the infant brain's default setting self-blame?
That's a great question.
I mean, from a purely evolutionary standpoint, doesn't it make more sense for a kid to just get angry, cry louder, or somehow blame the environment rather than internalize this, complex, heavy feeling of personal worthlessness?
It seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah. Help me understand the biology there, because it seems like a terrible survival mechanism to just hate yourself from day one.
That is such a critical distinction to make, and it actually is a brilliant survival mechanism, even though it causes us so much pain later in life.
Really? How?
What's fascinating here is the developmental psychology behind why this early programming sticks so hard.
Hmm.
An infant cannot differentiate between themselves and their environment.
Meaning they don't know where they end and the mom begins.
Exactly. Their brain hasn't developed the psychological boundary to say, I am me and you are you. It's a state of complete enmeshment.
Oh, wow.
Furthermore, a human infant is entirely dependent on their caregivers for physical survival.
Right. They can't do anything for themselves.
A baby cannot feed itself, defend itself, or even regulate its own body temperature.
Right. So a toddler isn't psychoanalyzing their dad. They aren't thinking, oh, my father is a complex human being struggling with a difficult economy and undiagnosed depression.
Exactly. The child does not possess the cognitive capacity for that kind of nuance. If a child were to recognize that their caregiver is incompetent, broken, or dangerous, the terror of that realization would be biologically overwhelming.
Because it means they're not going to survive.
It would mean absolute certain death. So the child's brain does something incredibly clever to maintain a sense of control and hope.
Okay, I'm listening.
It internalizes the failure of the environment as a personal flaw. The logic encoded at a pre-verbal level, mind you, goes like this.
Yeah.
My parent isn't broken. I am just bad. If I am not being comforted, it's because I'm not good enough to be comforted.
Oh, that is so heartbreaking.
It is. But the logic continues. If I am the problem, then maybe if I become quieter or better or more perfect, I can fix the situation and earn the love I need to survive.
Wow. So blaming yourself is actually an infant's way of feeling powerful in a terrifyingly helpless situation.
Exactly that.
It's an illusion of control. Like, if I'm the problem, I can fix the problem.
Precisely. But the tragedy is that this negative core belief, I am not good enough, becomes internalized at a cellular level.
It just bakes right in.
It hardwires the developing nervous system.
Yeah.
So when you grow up, it's not just a rational, fleeting thought you can argue away with logic.
Right. You can't just tell yourself to stop thinking it.
No, because it feels like an absolute, undeniable truth about your very existence.
And as we grow up, this fragile, highly compromised blueprint gets completely bombarded by societal expectations.
Almost constantly.
The conversation in the sources really highlights this perfect picture we are constantly fed. It's this impossible double bind of modern life.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It really is. Society tells you that you must possess this fierce, absolute, independent autonomy. You must be completely self-reliant.
Right.
But simultaneously, you need a stellar, high-achieving career, a phenomenal and adventurous sex life, and you need to find a partner who is both incredibly exciting and dangerously passionate.
But also stable. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
While also being a perfectly stable, reliable pillar of domestic tranquility.
It's an utterly exhausting list of demands. You're expected to excel in every single domain of human existence simultaneously, while also finding a partner who meets an equally flawless, completely contradictory standard.
Right, like you want the wild outlaw who always remembers to pay the electric bill on time.
Yeah, and it simply doesn't exist.
It's literally like being handed a deeply faulty architectural blueprint as an infant. Maybe the foundation is cracked, maybe the load-bearing walls are totally missing because your parents weren't emotionally available.
A great analogy.
And then you reach adulthood and you're trying to build a basic livable house just to survive the winter. But society is standing over your shoulder, shoving impossible, heavily curated Pinterest boards in your face.
Right, demanding you build a perfect, glass-walled, modern mansion.
Yeah. You're looking at your cracked foundation, looking at the Pinterest board, and just feeling like a total failure.
And because you already have that core belief from infancy telling you, I am not good enough, the failure to build the Pinterest mansion just confirms everything you've secretly suspected about yourself.
It just validates the childhood trauma.
Completely.
Okay, so if that belief I'm not good enough is the cracked foundation of your house, It naturally dictates how you are going to attach to other people as you get older.
You cannot build a secure, trusting relationship on a foundation that constantly whispers that you don't actually deserve to be there.
Absolutely. And this brings up a massive portion of the interview, which is the mechanics of attachment styles.
Yes. Marian and Ad reference the foundational post-WWWII research by John Bowlby here.
Bowlby, right.
Bowlby's work is really the bedrock of modern relational psychology. To give some context, after the Second World War, Bowlby was studying orphaned and homeless children in Europe.
Okay.
The prevailing medical wisdom at the time was that if a child was fed, kept warm, and protected from disease, they would be perfectly fine.
Like they were just little houseplants or something?
Pretty much. Affection was considered a luxury, or even something that would, spoil a child.
Wow.
But Bowlby noticed that infants in institutions who were receiving adequate physical care but zero emotional touch or connection were literally failing to thrive. Some were even dying.
Because humans are biologically wired to need connection just as much as calories?
Yes. Bowlby realized that attachment isn't just a nice psychological bonus. It is a primary biological drive.
Right.
How our caregivers respond to that drive creates our internal working model of the world, which we then carry right into adulthood.
And today, we generally categorize these into a few distinct styles.
Exactly.
Okay, let's break these down thoroughly because I want everyone listening to figure out which camp they might fall into or, which camp their exes fall into.
That's usually the more popular exercise.
Right. First, there's secure attachment. What does that actually look like in the real world, say, on a random Tuesday night?
A securely attached person feels a baseline sense of safety in proximity to a partner, but they also maintain their own autonomy. If their partner goes away on a business trip, or it's quiet one evening because they had a hard day at work, the secure person doesn't panic.
They don't immediately start spiraling.
Exactly. They don't internalize the partner's silence as an impending breakup. They are comfortable in their own skin. They trust that the connection is stable, and they can clearly communicate their needs without using manipulation or demanding constant reassurance.
Okay. Sounds lovely and incredibly rare.
They can feel that way.
Then we have avoidant attachment. This is the person who feels suffocated the minute things get serious, right?
Generally, yes. In infancy, this person likely had caregivers who were rejecting or intolerant of emotional displays.
Like, stop crying, toughen up.
Exactly. The child learned that reaching out for connection results in punishment or coldness. So their nervous system adapted by basically shutting down the attachment system.
So they just learned to go it alone.
Right. And as an adult, closeness registers biologically as a threat. When intimacy increases, they feel a deep physical sense of being engulfed or trapped, so they pull away. They might prioritize independence over everything else.
Yeah.
Avoid deep emotional conversations or, find minor flaws in their partner to justify creating distance.
Just nitpicking to create space.
Exactly.
Okay, then there is anxious attachment. The Dutch word Marian uses is verlatingsangst, which I love because it translates literally to a severe, almost phobic fear of abandonment.
Yes, and this stems from inconsistent caregiving.
Meaning?
Sometimes the parent was there and wonderfully loving, but other times they were completely absent or maybe even intrusive.
So the kid never knew what they were going to get.
Exactly. The child learns that love is available, but highly unpredictable. You have to fight for it.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. As an adult, this translates to a hypervigilant nervous system. An anxious person is constantly scanning their partner for any sign of pulling away.
So if a text is delayed by an hour...
A delayed text message doesn't mean the partner is busy. To the anxious brain, it means the partner has realized they are unlovable and is preparing to leave them.
Oh, wow.
They cling tightly to soothe their own panic, which, ironically, often drives the partner away.
Right, fulfilling the prophecy. But the real meat of this discussion focuses on the fourth variation, which is disorganized or anxious avoidant attachment. Marian spends a lot of time on this.
She does. Disorganized attachment is arguably the most complex, chaotic, and painful variation.
Why is that?
It usually develops when the caregiver, the very person the child must rely on for survival, is simultaneously a source of fear.
Oh.
The parent might be abusive, deeply volatile, or carrying unresolved trauma themselves.
Well, let me stop you right there.
Yeah.
This is where the true biological paradox kicks in, right?
Yes.
Because an infant is wired to run toward their caregiver when they are terrified. But what happens if the caregiver is the monster terrifying them?
You've hit the nail on the head. It creates an impossible biological conflict within the nervous system.
His short circuit.
Exactly. The child's instincts say, flee to safety. But the source of safety is the source of the danger.
Wow.
As an adult, this creates a profound push-pull dynamic in relationships.
So if a partner gets too close, the disorganized person pushes them away because intimacy equals danger. It triggers the avoidance side.
Right.
But the absolute second that partner creates distance, the disorganized person's anxious side kicks in, they panic about being abandoned, and they desperately try to pull the partner back.
Exactly. There's no safe zone. Closeness is terrifying, and distance is terrifying.
Marian shares a deeply personal, brutal example of this.
Yes, she does.
She talks about a relationship she had with a man she refers to as the musician. She says this was her most significant relationship, and it lasted an astounding 25 years.
That's a long time to be stuck in that pattern.
And she admits with a lot of vulnerability that it took her decades to realize that they were both completely trapped in this exact, exhausting push-pull pattern.
Right.
She describes massive mutual suffering. For 2.5 decades, they were just relentlessly triggering each other's core attachment wounds over and over again.
It is a tragedy of timing and really a lack of awareness. Without the psychological vocabulary to understand why their bodies were reacting this way, they likely rationalized the chaos.
They thought it meant they were soulmates.
Right, they probably thought the immense pain and the dramatic reconciliations were just proof of how deep and passionate their love was.
When really it was just biological panic.
Exactly. In reality, it was just two deeply dysregulated nervous systems stuck in an endless, punishing loop of recreating their childhood fears.
Here's where it gets really interesting, especially for anyone listening who is currently navigating the dating world. How does this push-pull dynamic manifest in modern dating culture?
That is the million-dollar question.
Because you look at dating apps, you look at the way people treat each other today, and it seems like this disorganized chaos isn't the exception, it's the rule.
It feels ubiquitous because this dynamic is highly stimulating.
What do you mean by stimulating?
People are walking around consciously thinking and stating right on their dating profiles that they are looking for a secure, calm, communicative partner.
Yeah, everyone says they want good communication.
But underneath, their nervous system is actually programmed to seek out the familiar chaos of their early blueprint.
Ah.
If your childhood taught you that love is unpredictable, that it requires you to prove your worth, or that it is intimately intertwined with anxiety, then a genuinely secure, emotionally available partner will feel wrong.
I have friends who do exactly this.
Most of us do on some level.
They meet someone nice, someone who texts them back, someone who is consistent, and they tell me, I don't know, there just wasn't a spark. They were kind of boring.
That spark they're looking for is often just anxiety.
Mind-blowing.
The nervous system encounters a secure person and says, this is too quiet. Where is the threat? I only know how to operate in a crisis.
So if there's no crisis, it's not love.
Exactly. If there's no threat, this person must not be important to me. So people unconsciously bypass healthy partners and magnetically gravitate toward the people who recreate the specific anxiety of their childhood.
Because that anxiety feels like home.
It feels recognizable. It feels like love to a dysregulated system.
This realization completely blew my mind as I was reading Marian's insights. What so many of us define as sexual tension, passion, or epic, cinematic love is actually, from a biological standpoint, pure cortisol-driven anxiety.
We are entirely mislabeling a primal stress response as romance.
It's just wild.
And this is where we have to deeply analyze the chemistry of chaos. It is a brilliant and deeply unsettling reframing of how we experience attraction.
Okay, so let's invent a scenario to really understand the medicinal partner dynamic the interview describes.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's say I have an anxious attachment style, I have that fear of abandonment, and I start dating someone who is avoidant. Things are great for 3 weeks.
A honeymoon phase.
Right. Then, suddenly, my avoidant partner pulls away. They stop texting back. They are cold on the phone. They say they need space. Instantly, I experience intense physical stress. My chest tightens, I can't sleep, I'm checking my phone every 5 minutes.
Your nervous system is sounding the alarm.
My cortisol, the stress hormone, is just skyrocketing. My brain goes into pure survival mode. And my inner monologue starts trying to rationalize this immense pain.
Because you have to make sense of the suffering.
Exactly. I tell myself, well, because I feel so terrible, because I can barely eat, this person must be the love of my life. I must care about them so deeply because look how much I am suffering without them.
That is the ultimate trap of the dysregulated nervous system right there. You are completely confusing the sheer terror of abandonment with the depth of your devotion.
It's a complete misinterpretation of the data.
Yes, your prefrontal cortex, The logical, reasoning part of your brain essentially shuts down under the flood of cortisol. The amygdala, the fear center, is running the show.
So logic is out the window.
Completely. You cannot see that this person is treating you poorly. You only feel an overwhelming biological imperative to restore contact to survive.
Right. It's like someone breaking into my house, stealing all my furniture, leaving me to sit on the cold floor for 3 days, and then finally they come back and bring me my couch.
That is a very vivid way to picture it.
But it's true. When they bring the couch back, my brain releases a massive flood of relieving chemicals, dopamine, oxytocin. Suddenly, I am weeping with gratitude.
Right.
This person becomes the medicine for the very stress they just caused. I completely ignore the fact that they created the deficit in the first place. I'm just so grateful to have a place to sit.
That is a phenomenal analogy. The partner becomes both the poison and the cure.
Which keeps you totally hooked.
And Marian points out that this specific chemical cocktail, extreme, agonizing stress, followed by sudden extreme relief, creates an incredibly powerful trauma bond.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It can lead to mind-blowing, intense sexual encounters, actually, because the body is discharging all that pent-up survival energy.
Wow, okay.
But she is adamant. You must recognize that this is a trauma response. It is an addiction cycle. It is not love.
And this dynamic, using fear and relief to create an artificial bond, isn't just happening by accident in messy relationships.
No, it's not.
The interview takes this a step further and extrapolates how this anxiety-driven dynamic is actively exploited in modern internet culture. Specifically, they bring up the manosphere and the rise of pickup artist tactics.
Yes, they do touch on that.
We're talking about strategies like intentionally ignoring someone, or negging, which is offering a backhanded compliment, or mildly humiliating someone in order to manufacture attraction.
Right.
Now, I want to look at this strictly from an impartial clinical perspective. Without judging the politics of these internet subcultures, what is actually happening neurologically when someone uses a tactic like negging?
From a purely psychological and neurological perspective, these tactics are highly calculated mechanisms. They're designed to artificially manufacture the exact push-pull cycle we just described.
Okay, break that down for me.
When a pickup artist approaches someone and delivers a neg, perhaps a slightly insulting comment about their clothing, or behaving with sudden, unpredictable coldness after showing initial interest, that tactic artificially spikes the target's cortisol.
It creates panic.
It triggers a sudden micro-fear of rejection and social exclusion.
It creates an instant, burning insecurity in the target where there wasn't one 60 seconds ago.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Humans are deeply social creatures, you know.
Yeah.
Our evolutionary survival depended on not being cast out of the tribe.
If you get kicked out of the cave, you die.
Exactly. So, when social approval is suddenly withdrawn, the target's brain becomes hyper-focused on resolving that social stress.
They need to get back in the tribe.
Right. The target subconsciously feels driven to win back the approval of the person who just took it away in order to feel safe again.
That is so manipulative.
When the pickup artist finally drops the cold act and offers a crumb of validation, the relief feels immensely rewarding to the target's brain.
The poison and the cure again.
The victim's nervous system misinterprets this intense, manufactured cycle of stress and relief as genuine magnetic attraction.
Yeah.
It is quite literally the weaponization of human attachment anxiety.
It's hacking someone's nervous system to bypass any rational assessment of compatibility. I mean, if your brain is busy dealing with a cortisol spike, it's not pausing to ask, wait, do I even share any core values with this person?
Exactly. You are operating purely on survival instincts at that point.
Okay, but let me challenge this entire framework for a second.
Go for it.
If we remove the cortisol, if we remove the high stakes, the fear of loss, the intense, chaotic highs and lows, do relationships just become terminally boring?
I hear that a lot.
Are Marian and Ad basically arguing that healthy love is just sitting on a beige couch in absolute silence staring at the wall together? Because that doesn't sound very appealing either.
It's a very common fear, and it's why so many people resist healing. But the reality they present is quite different.
Okay, tell me.
The sources explain that when a relationship is driven primarily by adrenaline, cortisol, and the fear of loss, you aren't actually loving the other person at all. You are, in fact, entirely self-absorbed.
Wait, self-absorbed? But when you're in that chaotic state, you're obsessed with the other person.
It feels like an obsession with them.
You literally cannot stop thinking about them, checking their social media, analyzing their texts. How is that self-absorbed?
Because you are not obsessed with them as a flawed, complex, independent human being.
Yeah.
You are obsessed with what they represent to your nervous system.
Oh, wow.
You are only using the other person to regulate your own internal panic and make yourself feel safe. You aren't seeing them. You are seeing a mechanism to turn off your anxiety.
That is a brutal realization.
You were essentially using them as a human anxiety medication.
Wow. So I'm not loving you. I'm just using you to fix my own internal brokenness.
Exactly. True connection, genuine intimacy, where you actually have the emotional bandwidth to see the other person, hear their needs, and care for them without a hidden agenda that can only happen when your nervous system is calm.
And that calm isn't boring.
Not at all. That calmness isn't boring. It's the prerequisite for actual depth. It allows you to explore who the other person truly is, rather than just forcing them into a role to manage your trauma.
That makes total sense. And relying on someone else to be your anxiety medication to regulate your self-worth is incredibly dangerous.
Highly dangerous.
Because the moment they have a bad day or the moment they naturally need a little space, your entire emotional ecosystem collapses.
It falls apart entirely.
Which leads us seamlessly into the next major concept they discuss: the insidious nature of codependency and the crushing burden of perfectionism.
Codependency is a word that gets thrown around constantly in pop psychology.
People use it to mean we like spending a lot of time together.
Right, but the definition explored here is razor sharp and much more severe. Codependency is defined as literally needing the other person's judgment to feel good about yourself.
Ouch.
Your internal emotional state is entirely dictated by external validation. If your partner is mad at you or disappointed in you, you don't just feel sad. You feel as though you have lost your fundamental right to exist.
Your self-worth is entirely outsourced to their mood.
Exactly.
Marian shares her personal origin story to explain how this develops, and it is incredibly poignant.
It really gives you a window into her mind.
She describes her father as a deeply loving man in certain respects. He was the kind of dad who read Pippi Longstocking to her. He did gymnastics with her in the living room.
There was genuine joy and playfulness.
But on the other hand, he suffered from deep, dark, overwhelming depressions, and he was entirely emotionally unavailable.
Which is so confusing for a child.
If she was upset or crying, he simply didn't know how to handle her tears. He couldn't hold space for her negative emotions.
And this goes right back to the childhood blueprint we discussed earlier. She had a loving figure who was simultaneously incapable of holding her emotional reality.
Right, he was physically present but emotionally absent when she needed him most.
Exactly.
Consequently, Marian learned a devastating lesson early on. Keep all your struggles, all your pain, completely to yourself. She grew up believing it was completely normal to suffer in silence while in a relationship.
She learned that your partner isn't there to help carry your pain.
She learned to settle for less emotionally. And fascinatingly, she notes that as a young adult, she actively rejected nice people.
Yes, this part was striking.
If someone was straightforwardly kind, emotionally available, and communicative, she wasn't interested. She found them off-putting because they didn't match that tormented, dual-natured psychological pattern she was used to from her father.
It's a brilliant, tragic illustration of how we consistently seek the familiar over the healthy, even when the familiar is hurting us.
It's so true.
But the interview touches on an even deeper psychological layer here, bringing in Jungian and Hillmanian psychology to explain why we place such impossible demands on our partners.
Okay, stop right there. I know Carl Jung, but you mentioned Hillmanian psychology. ELAF 5, explain, I'm 5, who James Hillman is, and what his specific psychological framework means in the context of Marian's story.
Certainly. James Hillman was a post-Jungian psychologist who developed what is known as archetypal psychology.
Archetypal, okay.
A core part of this is looking at the deep, mythic structures in our psyche. Hillman argued that we are driven by powerful archetypes: the hero, the wise old man, and in this context, the perfect father or the perfect mother.
Okay, so these are like templates in our brains.
Exactly. As children, we inherently need these godlike, infallible figures to feel safe in a massive, terrifying world. We project perfection onto our parents.
But our parents aren't perfect. They are just regular, stressed-out people trying to pay bills.
Exactly. And in the past, culturally, we had ways to manage this realization when we grew up and saw our parents' flaws.
What do you mean?
Historically, human beings possessed a broader spiritual or religious horizon. We had tight-knit, multi-generational communities. We had shared mythologies.
Right.
We could project these massive expectations of perfection, total salvation, and unconditional divine love onto a deity, a religion, or a communal structure.
But in modern, highly secular, highly individualized society, a lot of us don't have that robust spiritual framework or that tight-knit village anymore.
We don't. So where does all that immense primal expectation go?
Oh, I see where this is going.
We project it directly onto our romantic partners. We demand that this very human, very flawed person sitting across from us at the breakfast table fulfill the role of the infallible caregiver.
That is so unfair to them.
It really is. We expect them to heal all our childhood wounds, anticipate our every need without us having to ask, and never ever let us down.
We are basically demanding that they be God for us.
Exactly. We crush our partners under the weight of expecting them to be perfect, and it is a role no human being can possibly fulfill.
None of us can live up to that.
We set them up for inevitable failure, and then we are devastated and furious when they reveal themselves to be just as flawed and frightened as we are.
And Marian realized this expectation of perfection didn't just ruin her love life, it mirrored her career perfectly.
Yes, the connection she makes there is fascinating.
This was a light bulb moment for me. She was a very successful actress in the Netherlands, but she realized that because she felt as a deeply insecure child that she didn't inherently have the right to exist, she constantly sought to be chosen.
The parallels between the casting couch and the dating world are striking here.
Right. Whether it was a casting director looking at her headshot or a romantic partner looking at her across a candlelit table, the core drive was identical. She was begging to be chosen so she could feel valid.
It's all the same dynamic.
She realized that her people-pleasing, her drive to be the perfect actress, to be the perfect low-maintenance girlfriend, these weren't traits of a naturally generous, easygoing person. They were just desperate coping mechanisms to secure safety.
Perfectionism is so often misunderstood in our culture, you know? It's often framed as a drive for excellence or a strong work ethic.
I think it's a good thing.
But in the context of relational psychology, perfectionism is a trauma response. It is a survival strategy.
How so?
The internal monologue is basically, if I am perfect, you won't leave me. If I have the perfect body, the perfect career, and never cause any conflict, I am safe from criticism and abandonment.
But here is the profound, tragic irony of that strategy. Perfectionism is supposed to keep you safe and secure the love you desperately want, right?
That's the goal.
But it actually forces you to create a fake self. You put on a mask, you bury your actual needs and your messy emotions.
You hide the real you.
So even if the person loves the mask, even if the casting director praises the performance, the real you inside never truly feel love.
Because you know it's a lie.
Exactly, because, deep down, they are only loving a performance. They don't know the real you. You can never truly be loved for who you are if you are constantly acting.
It is the ultimate hollow victory. You win the prize, but you are too alienated from yourself to enjoy it.
It's so sad when you think about it.
It is. And this realization brings up a really important cultural myth that the interview takes the time to systematically debunk.
Which myth is that?
We have this deeply romanticized idea in society of the tortured artist.
Oh, yeah.
The idea that great acting, breathtaking music, brilliant writing must come from deep, agonizing suffering and this kind of desperate, neurotic perfectionism.
Oh, we love that narrative. The starving, heartbroken, chaotic genius who produces masterpieces precisely because their life is a total disaster.
We celebrate it. We really do. And Marian, having spent her life in the arts, admits that, yes, a lot of beautiful art and music has certainly been born from profound pain.
Sure.
But she firmly debunks the necessity of it. Creativity does not require suffering to exist.
Thank goodness.
In fact, relying on suffering is ultimately destructive. Creativity, expression, and truly brilliant art can just as easily and far more sustainably be born from a place of love, safety, self-acceptance, and a calm nervous system.
You don't have to bleed for your art.
Exactly. You don't need to be bleeding emotionally to create something beautiful or to be worthy of attention.
That realization that we are constantly projecting our childhood survival tactics and our desperate need for perfect caregivers onto our partners, it really clarifies why so many modern relationships fail, especially as we get older.
Yes, it shifts the blame from them to us, in a way.
This naturally leads us into a fascinating discussion in the sources about longevity and the illusion of rejection.
The context of modern relationships has shifted dramatically just in the last century, strictly in terms of human lifespan. We rarely factor this into our psychological expectations of marriage.
It's so obvious once Marian points it out, but it completely shifted my perspective. In the past, people died much younger.
Much younger.
Childbirth complications, disease, harsh labor conditions, wars. When people said, "till death do us part," They were often making a commitment that might only last 10, 15, or maybe 20
It
years.
was a very different timeline.
Today, with modern medicine, partners regularly live well past 70 or 80. You might marry someone at 25 and spend 4, 5, or even 6 decades with the exact same person.
And that unprecedented length of time acts as a massive, inescapable pressure cooker for any unresolved psychological issues.
You just can't hide it for that long.
Exactly. You can perhaps hide your childhood trauma behind a mask of perfectionism for 5 years, but you cannot hide it for 50 years.
The sources note a brutal truth about modern divorce, particularly later in life. We like to use these soft, socially acceptable phrases. We say couples just organically grew apart.
Which does happen.
And sometimes they do, people change, but Marian points out that very often people separate because they refuse to clean up their own psychological shit, to use her blunt terminology.
It's very blunt, but accurate.
They refuse to look at their own cracked foundation, and they endlessly project it onto their partner year after year, decade after decade.
It wears people down.
Eventually, the weight of carrying someone else's unresolved childhood trauma for 30 years just breaks the relationship. The partner simply cannot bear the projection anymore.
It's the critical difference between two people evolving on different paths and naturally separating versus two people actively drowning in each other's unhealed wounds.
Exactly.
But when those separations do happen, whether at year 2 or year 20, how we process the ending is entirely dependent on our baseline of self-worth.
And this leads to what I think is one of the most powerful reframings of rejection in the entire text.
I completely agree. This reframing completely changes how you look at a breakup or a firing or any loss.
Marian argues that a partner can only truly reject you if you are already rejecting yourself.
Let's let that sink in for a moment because it's profound. A partner can only reject you if you are already rejecting yourself.
It is brilliant. Let's walk through the mechanics of that. If someone leaves you, and deep down you possess that hidden core belief from childhood that says, I am not good enough, then that breakup isn't just a sad event. It becomes excruciating, undeniable proof of your worthlessness.
It validates the deepest fear.
Your inner critic screams, see? I knew I was unlovable, I knew I was a fraud, and here is the ultimate evidence. They left.
And this is the critical difference the sources draw between pain and suffering.
Yes, the distinction is vital. Tell us about that.
Pain is the natural, inevitable sadness of losing something you cared about. It is clean, it is human, and if you let yourself feel it, it eventually passes.
Right. It's just a normal biological reaction to loss.
Suffering, however, is the agonizing, repetitive narrative we spin around the pain.
The story we tell ourselves.
Suffering is the story you tell yourself, that because this person left, you are fundamentally flawed, broken, and destined to die alone.
Wow.
The event causes the pain. Your internal dialogue causes the suffering.
But if you possess inherent self-worth, if you know in your bones that you are a flawed, sometimes annoying, but fundamentally worthy human being, a breakup is a completely different experience.
It's completely different.
It is simply two people realizing their paths are diverging. One wants to go left, one wants to go right. It hurts, yes. There is grief. But it doesn't destroy your identity because your identity wasn't entirely dependent on their presence.
It didn't break your foundation.
Exactly. I want to relate this directly to you, the listener, right now. Think about the last time you experienced a massive failure in your life.
We've all had them.
Maybe it was a devastating breakup. Maybe you were suddenly fired from a job you loved. Maybe a friendship ended abruptly. Looking back, how much of the devastation you felt was just the natural, clean pain of the actual event?
And how much of that absolute devastation was your own inner voice using that event as ammunition to bully you, to tell you that you're a worthless failure?
Right. This raises an important question, though. If we are generating so much of our own intense suffering through perfectionism, projection, and self-rejection, what does the alternative actually look like?
What does healthy self-esteem look like in practice?
Exactly. Because true self-worth, as defined in Marian's journey, isn't about looking in the mirror every morning and delusionally believing you are absolutely flawless.
It's actually the exact opposite.
It is the profound freedom to allow yourself to fail. It is the freedom to be occasionally entirely annoying or inconvenient in front of others without apologizing for your existence.
True self-worth is simply the commitment to refuse to abandon yourself when you inevitably make a mistake.
It's becoming your own secure base. Knowing that even if you mess up at work, even if you say the wrong thing on a date, you aren't going to turn around and verbally abuse yourself in your own head. You will have your own back.
Which is incredibly empowering.
But let's be honest. That sounds great in theory. It sounds lovely on a podcast or in a self-help book. The real gritty question is, how do we actually do it? How do we break these deeply ingrained, lifelong neurological patterns?
The most crucial point the sources make regarding actual healing is that intellectual understanding is insufficient.
You can't just think your way out of it.
Exactly. You and I can sit here for hours explaining the biology of Bowlby's attachment styles. You can read every psychology book in the world, you can memorize all the terminology, but you cannot think your way out of a trauma response.
So just that's the alternative.
You must drop from the head into the body.
Marian recounts a profound turning point epiphany she had while traveling in Italy, which perfectly illustrates this shift from the head to the body.
Yes, the Italy story is a great example.
She was physically exhausted, burned out, and realized she was deeply addicted to toxic, self-critical thinking. Her brain was just a continuous, punishing loop of negativity about her life, her relationships, her failures.
The suffering we talked about earlier.
And in that exhaustion, she had a massive breakthrough. She realized she didn't actually have to obey the cruel voice in her head.
She could just let it be.
She didn't have to follow its commands or argue with it. She decided, in her words, to just let that voice babble in the background like an annoying radio left on in another room.
That is the essence of mindfulness right there.
Instead of fighting the thoughts, trying to perfectly rationalize them away, or believing everything she thought, she withdrew her active participation.
She became the observer of the thought rather than the victim of it.
Exactly. And once she stopped fighting the voice in her head, she did something revolutionary for someone with her trauma background. She asked her physical body a very simple question.
What was the question?
She asked, what do I actually feel like doing right now? Not what should I do, not what will make me look good, but what does my body want?
That is a massive shift.
And by shifting from the anxious head to the present body, she created the internal space and peace that ultimately allowed her to write her first book.
She was able to do this because she finally recognized the physicality of stress.
The actual sensations in the body.
Exactly. That core negative belief we keep returning to, I'm not good enough, is not a personality trait. It is not an objective fact about who you are. It is a physical stress reaction that has become trapped in the tissues of the body.
This is so vital for people to understand. When you are triggered in a relationship, let's say your partner comes home from work, they slam the door a little too hard, and they have a slightly annoyed tone of voice.
A very common scenario.
Suddenly, your disorganized attachment kicks in, and you feel absolute panic. You have to stop and notice where that stress lives in your physical body. Is your throat suddenly tight? Are there knots in your stomach? Is your chest heavy and restricted?
And this is where the actual intervention happens. This is the work.
How so?
Instead of taking that overwhelming physical panic and projecting it outward, instead of screaming at your partner, you made me feel this way, you are making me anxious, reassure me right now and fix it. You must do something incredibly difficult. You must sit quietly with that physical sensation. You must realize that this panic belongs to you. It is an echo of your childhood blueprint, triggered by the slammed door, but it is not necessarily a reality of the present moment.
Right. Your partner might just be mad about traffic.
Exactly. You must learn to soothe your own nervous system, perhaps through deep breathing, taking a walk, or physically grounding yourself before you re-engage.
Marian talks about going through a phase to achieve this that she calls the up-harden phase.
It's a very interesting concept.
It's a Dutch concept that roughly translates to a hardening or a curing phase, much like wet clay setting in a kiln to become strong and impermeable. To do this, she actually made a radical choice. She spent several years completely alone.
No relationships at all.
No relationships, no dating, no romantic entanglements whatsoever. She used that extended time to figure out who she actually was outside of the context of pleasing a partner.
She was essentially starving her codependent reflex to death by refusing to feed it with another person's validation.
It is a radical emotional detox. By removing the primary trigger, romantic relationships, she allowed her nervous system to finally establish a baseline of calm.
It allows you to reset the parameters of what feels normal, so that when you do eventually re-enter a relationship, you are operating from a place of conscious choice, not a desperate, unconscious biological need for a regulator.
And the interview concludes with a beautiful philosophical connection that truly brings all of this clinical psychology together. Adverbrug brings in Aristotelian wisdom to summarize the end goal of this journey.
Let's hear it. How does Aristotle tie into modern dating anxiety?
Aristotle argued, thousands of years ago, that a deep, healthy, and robust love for oneself is the absolute non-negotiable prerequisite for any genuine friendship or romantic relationship. If you do not possess that internal self-love, you are not actually capable of loving the other person. You are, as we discussed earlier, just trading stress responses. You are using them as a shield against your own self-loathing.
You cannot offer true generosity to a partner if you are fundamentally at war with yourself.
It's the classic airplane oxygen mask metaphor, but on a deep psychological level. You have to be full before you can pour into someone else's cup. Otherwise, you're just draining them to survive.
It is a profound realization that reframes the entire goal of dating. The goal isn't to find someone to complete you. The goal is to complete yourself so you can actually enjoy someone else.
Okay, let's take a deep breath and recap the massive journey we've been on today. We started by looking at how our earliest infancy, the way our caregivers handled our tears, draws the indelible blueprints for our adult love lives.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We explored how that blueprint shapes whether we develop secure, avoidant, anxious, or chaotic, disorganized attachment styles. We dove into the shocking biological reality that what we so often romanticize as passion is frequently just a cortisol-driven anxiety response.
A trauma bond masquerading as an epic romance.
Exactly. We examine how our modern secular culture forces us to project the archetype of the perfect, godlike caregiver onto our flawed partners, and how perfectionism and codependency force us into playing a role, preventing us from ever being truly loved for who we are.
And finally, we looked at how redefining rejection and learning to physically soothe the trauma trapped in our own bodies can free us from these ancient patterns.
Allowing us to find our worth internally rather than constantly forcing a partner to carry that heavy burden for us.
It is a phenomenal journey, from unconscious biological repetition to conscious embodied freedom. It is hard work, but it is the only path to genuine connection.
It really is. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. Something that builds on everything we've uncovered from Marian's journey today.
What's the thought?
We've talked a lot today about how easily and how tragically we confuse the desperate anxiety of needing to be chosen with true, genuine passion. So I want you to look at the thing you want most right now in your life.
Whether it's a relationship, a job, whatever.
Right. Maybe it's a specific romantic relationship you are chasing. Maybe it's a massive promotion at work that you've been grinding for. Or maybe it's just social recognition from a certain group of peers. Picture that burning desire clearly in your mind.
Got it.
Now, imagine that you could magically strip away all the anxiety, all the cortisol, all the desperate primal fear of rejection from that desire. Take all the panic away. What is actually left? When you remove the fear, what does a calm, unanxious ambition or a calm, unanxious love actually feel like to you?
That calm space, devoid of fear, is where your true life actually begins.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the narratives you tell yourself, take a deep breath, and we will catch you next time.